Hey there, hello. So this is definitely one of my favorite topics. Inspiration. I think as writers, as authors, as creatives, we probably either undervalue this whole concept of inspiration, or we kind of, because it's such a nebulous thing and it's very hard to nail it down or identify it or define it, we do the opposite, which is we kind of ignore it and give it very little attention, and so miss an incredible opportunity. So I wanted to talk a little bit about inspiration today and what its role is for creatives, what I have played around with and found to be true and found to be useful for myself and also for the people that I work with, my clients that I coach. So I just wanted to have a bit of a play around with that and share that with you. Sound good? Sound like a good topic? So anyway, a bit about me. I'm Kylie. I am the author whisperer. I help indie authors get their books out of their heads and into the world. That is my passion. Well, actually, I've got a lot of passions, but one of the things that I love doing is helping others who have a message to share to get that message out in the form of a book. And the reason I love using a book is because a book is such it's such a great tool to spread your word to people who would never otherwise have heard it. It's something that lasts. There's longevity to a book, right? Like, I mean, some of these books I've got here, like, they're 100 years old. Well, actually, I don't think I've got any that are 100 years old, but I've definitely got ones that are 50 years old and more. And of course, the beauty of a book is that it is so accessible to everyone. It's not something that is short-lived like a lot of stuff that happens on social media, like say this video is. It's not something that is only going to be with a small circle of people that you might live in the vicinity geographically, like say like a speech or giving a talk, a public talk. It's also not something that's sort of super expensive, like say a course or something like that, some kind of experience where even a seminar where you might pay large amounts of money to be part of it. This is not looking right. A book you can buy for, under $10 usually. So that's pretty cool. That is one of the reasons why I think if you've got an important message to share. Oh, and the other thing about a book is because of the length of it, and there is an ideal length for a non-fiction book, but because it gives you the leisure to explore your topic, you don't have to kind of get to the point in 5 minutes, like you should in a live stream like this. A book gives you the opportunity to lay out your argument in a very good way that you're going to be able to help. People are going to be able to understand your point of view and understand the message completely. Anyway, that's sort of besides the point, but I just thought that was a good opportunity to explain why I am so passionate about books as being the vehicle for sharing your message. So let's talk about inspiration. Now, inspiration, oh my goodness, this is one that trips up a lot of authors, especially newbie authors, people who haven't been doing this for long or it's their first time trying to do it. And what happens is that... Okay, well, let's kind of define inspiration first. That's probably a good place to start. So inspiration is, from my perspective, is when you are inspired and you are taking action from that inspiration. The inspiration, it comes from within, but it almost feels like it comes from without. Sometimes it feels like you are inspired by something But really, whatever that something is, whether it's a experience that you had, something that you overheard, or some kind of divine intervention or whatever, the inspiration triggers something inside you, something really deep and profound, something that when it's triggered, it lights you up. And of course, that's kind of what that word means, to be lit up from inside. Now, this is the perfect time to take action, is when you're inspired. When you take inspired action, the result of that inspired action is, of course, something very special, because it's not forced, it's not it's not faked, it's basically coming from a place where you are completely aligned with your higher purpose. You are following your you are following something that is larger than yourself. It's a part of yourself, but it's kind of like the pure essence of yourself, without all the other shit that we cover up with. And that is the opposite of inspiration. And unfortunately, for a lot of new authors, or like authors who've done it a few times and written and published books and so on, what can happen is that instead of coming from that place of inspiration, you end up coming from that place of expectation or criticism or judgment or forcing. It's very different. The energy and the resultant work is very different. And to be honest, I think if you are not coming from a place that is inspired, what you're going to produce is going to be a lesser quality. It's not going to be as authentic as it should be. It's not going to be as true to what your message is. And so the work you produce is going to be below standard, and you won't be proud of it, and it won't inspire you to want to do more, and so on and so on. So it is a big deal. But here's the question. Here's the $64 million question. How do you get inspired? Like, how do you manufacture that? Because sometimes if you're wanting to write a book, or you're in the middle of doing your self-editing, or there is a deadline that you have to work towards, sometimes you have to be able to get inspiration on command, and that can be so difficult, right? Are you kind of understanding where I'm coming from? Is this making sense? And that's where the forced really icky, really unnatural, inauthentic kind of action comes from, because you know you have to do this thing, so you do it from that place. Now, you see, the flip side of that is just kind of waiting around for inspiration to strike, and we don't all have the leisure to do that. And also, unfortunately, what happens when you do that is that inspiration is a habit as well. Now, that sounds like it's a bit going against what I just said when I was talking about how much inspiration is something that inspires you to authentic action. But the thing is that if you just wait around for inspiration to strike before you take any action, you might be waiting a long time. You might get very little done. It might be years or decades between books, and it may never even happen. So that's not a good solution either. There has to be it's not a compromise. It's not a happy medium. It's actually it's actually a method of I want to say manufacturing inspiration, but that's really not the right word. Of encouraging inspiration, of allowing inspiration, of creating the space for inspiration. and then creating a habit so that this is something that is more your natural, normal state than a unusual event, which is a far more useful place to be as an author, because, you know, we want inspiration to strike. And there's a fantastic quote, which I don't know who said it, but it was someone like Mark Twain, and I always get my quote sources mixed up, so don't quote me on that. But it was something like, you know, inspiration strikes every time I sit my ass down in the chair, or something like that. The idea being you create the space for it. Okay, how do you do that though? Because it all sounds well and good, but how do you actually do it? If you're not feeling inspired, how do you make yourself feel inspired? How do you get the muse to come out and play? Now, the last video I did was about self-editing, and I strongly suggest you go back and watch that, because it has some really good information about how to encourage and grow your creative, wild writing spirit. That, I think, is super important for this process. That is how this begins or ends if you crush that creative wild spirit right in its early stages, which is what friggin' most of the people do. They are so harsh on themselves. There's so much self-judgment that they bring to anything that they do. They bring it from their childhood. They bring it from the way they were parented. They bring it from the way that the interactions they had at school, and all of that stuff is actually there to crush that spirit. And so it is very effective at doing that. And of course, once you've done that a few times, well, how likely is it that your creative spirit's going to come out and play? It's not very likely, is it? It's absolutely imperative that you allow this creative spirit. It's just like, think of it like a small kitten that you're trying to get to trust you, or a wild animal, right, that you're trying to get trust you. You're not going to you're not going to be demanding of it and be really annoyed with it if it does something that you don't approve of, because you will just terrify it and it will never come out and play with you again. So you have to be very accepting and just show it love and show it that this is a safe space and that there is no judgment. And you have to do the same thing with your own creative spirit. So that's number one. That's number one. Another thing that I have found incredibly useful when it comes to getting inspired when you're not feeling inspired, and how to create that situation, is physical movement. Now, when you are sitting at a desk with your hands on the keyboard, looking at the blinking cursor and all that, it's a very stagnant place. It's stagnant mentally and it's stagnant physically. So get physical. I find that even just 10 minutes of doing something very physical, but even better, like maybe doing something for a good hour or so, like having a really nice long walk that gets the body moving, gets the sweat flowing and blows the cobwebs out. Anything like that, and you will find as you're walking or doing whatever, like I've got a rebounder, and I really love that, and I find that can be a good place for inspiration to strike, but actually walking is the best. I find walking is good because it's not too demanding, but it's physical enough to get things moving, and it allows me the mental space to explore all sorts of things. By the time I get back, I'm just raring to go. Often I've got so many ideas going. So that can be a really good way to help bring inspiration when it's not there. So getting physical. So first of all, it's respecting that creative spirit and not crushing it before it even gets a chance to evolve. Second of all is doing something physical, and third of all would be the regularity of it. So like we said, it is really, really important to make space on a regular basis and not just sort of lie around hoping inspiration will strike today. Oh, it didn't. Well, hoping it will tomorrow. Oh, it didn't. Well, hoping it will next week. Oh, it didn't. Or hoping it will sometime this month. And oh, it didn't. You know what? That's not how it works. So you actually need to, I find that a daily discipline is super important. Now, that means that you create that space, and even if inspiration doesn't strike, you know that at this time, you know, every 24 hours, and it doesn't have to be the same time, but you know, whatever works for you, but definitely on a daily basis, you create the space, and it's like, okay, this is when I'm going to do my writing or my editing or whatever place you are in your author journey. On a daily basis, you create that space, and what happens is that although inspiration won't necessarily strike every single time, you're still going to give it that space and, you know, just write something uninspired, because what will happen is if you're showing up every day, and you're allowing and you're accepting and you're open, inspiration will start striking much more often. Maybe not every time, but certainly, you know, a lot more often than if you just sort of waited for it to happen. So it's a bit of a mind game. In fact, this whole thing is a mind game. It's more of a mind game than anything else. There's so many mental hoops that need to be jumped over, leapt through. There are so many games that we play with ourselves that stop us in our tracks, and they're a reflection of what's going on in our larger life, what's going on in the rest of our if there are places in your life that you're blocked, your writing life will magnify them. So they really just are a magnification of blocks that you actually already have. You may or may not be aware of them, but the writing and the journey of becoming an author magnifies them for you. So it can be very confronting, and if you didn't sign up for that, you thought you were just going to write this book, it can be a little bit of a shock that that's what is going on here. I didn't know that I was going to have to confront my feelings of self-worth and all this other shit that, you know, is perhaps something that you were vaguely aware of, but you'd been burying it and not paying it any attention. And then this process of writing and becoming an author and publishing and putting your work out there for the whole world and sharing your message, your deep heartfelt message, it brings it all to the fore, and you almost can't not face it. Now, I know that I'm painting a bit of a dire picture, but the way I see it is it's a brilliant opportunity. It is actually an opportunity to face some of these things. Like who needs therapy when you've got writing? Now, this might be the case where having a coach is useful, because an experienced coach will be able to help you navigate through those waters, because it is much more than just the technical hoo-ha of like uploading a book on Amazon and hitting publish. It's so much more than that, and the journey then can become so much more fulfilling for you as a person. I do say that writing a book is like therapy, because if you use it that way, if you actually if you actually do recognize that that's what's happening, and you face some of those demons, or you acknowledge that, you know, these are some aspects that you perhaps hadn't acknowledged about yourself before, you get the opportunity to work through them and put them behind you and actually become a more evolved and transformed person because of it. Now, what an incredible gift that is, and maybe not what you expected when you started out on this journey, but if you allow it, that's the kind of thing that can happen, and that I see happening with my authors all the time, that I have personally experienced time and time again. So it's not, you know, that's probably the difference between what I call authentic authoring, when you really are embracing this with, you know, arms outstretched and just like bring it on. I am ready to transform. My message is so important. I know it's going to transform my readers. It's here to transform the world. And of course, in the sharing of that message, or in the spreading of it sort of coming through me, I will be transformed too. That's the kind of experience it can be. And I would love that experience for you. If this is resonating with you and you're feeling like, man, I want some of that, well, let's work together, because this is the kind of stuff, this is the kind of discussions that I have with my one-on-one clients. And it's so much more than just writing a book. That's often a very, very small part of what's going on. So if that sounds like something you would like to explore, actually up-leveling yourself and working through your personal blocks to achieve your best self, then let's chat. Let's take this to the next level. I would love to be your mentor. You know, if you're the sort of person that can work on that level and you're ready to open yourself up to that sort of experience, then I would love to share it with you. Okay, well, that is all I've got to talk about today. I've got a cat here who's very keen on leaping onto my lap. So I hope that your book writing journey is as fulfilling for you as it will be for your readers when they get to read your book. All right, now don't forget, write and live like nobody's watching. Bye.